All right, welcome back. Today is Perek Tes, chapter 9. We finished, at least according to the map of Tanya, which I've told you before is not entirely authoritative. It was just written by some guy, but which is true. It's just somebody doing his best to try to represent some concepts in Tanya. But according to the map of Tanya, chapters 1 through 8 is one color code.
Oh.
Yeah, you see over there on the Tanya map?
Yeah,
Tanya map's over there. In this classroom, the Tanya map. It's blue, and you know what's the significance of blue? When Spotlight Design, 15, 20 years ago, whenever it was, it's just the Tanya map. I compiled probably. Well, I'm coming up in a couple weeks on our 22nd wedding anniversary, so I think we're. Thanks.
We have a party in Tanya.
Sure. I think we were married for 2 years when I made the Tanya map, so I think it's 20 years. Anyway, so the colors are just Spotlight Design. I don't think there's any specific Kabbalistic significance. Anyways, what?
Just don't give her a time.
Oh yeah, we can come up with it. Yeah. Well, if you pay $1,000, we reveal to you the secret of the color codes, like Scientology. Like if you take the Tanya class, that's free, but to reveal the secret of the color code, the secret briefcase, thousands of dollars. Yeah. Okay.
You got married at 25.
Correct. That's right. Oh, wow, you guys are compiling. You know more about me than Google.
I don't know if that's possible.
Okay.
No, last week told us you were 47.
Yes.
Our
Yes.
Mr. Portion is
Schlach. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Anyways, so we finished the first 8 chapters,
No.
which she needs a pen. We finished the first 8 chapters, which, oh my goodness.
I'll get it. The Red Sox.
Paula, the Bengals needed you last night.
Oh, it was a great game.
It was
I didn't
bad
see that.
calling.
It was a great game.
I don't even know who's playing.
Oh, it was a great game.
Because I left to go.
The Bengals and the Rams. You know what was cool? I had to memorize that there was no LA Rams. For years I had to remember there's no LA Rams. And now there's a LA Rams again. It's like we're in the 80s again. I now it's like back to the...
Everything comes back.
And the Bengals are in the Super Bowl again. That was like in the 80s. So I feel comfortable right now.
Okay, we're very happy.
Yeah. Maybe Pac-Man will make a comeback. Or Donkey Kong.
No, I went to a place actually. They have all the...
Donkey Kong!
I promise.
Oh my goodness. Don't even tell me where it is, because I will just...
What about that person?
I don't know if you'll
Yeah.
go there, but I'll tell you where it is privately.
What about that person you mentioned last week? That
What person?
nobody knew. You said it was from the 80s.
Oh, Gary Gygax!
Oh, I never looked it up. Gary Gygax.
From Lake Geneva.
Gary Gygax. Is your favorite game Donkey Kong?
You want to hear something interesting about Donkey Kong?
Yeah.
So the Japanese designer, I forget his
Are we
name.
online?
Yeah. The Japanese designer who created Donkey Kong, the guy who worked for Nintendo, I think they created Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
Anyways, why is he called Donkey Kong if he's a gorilla? Should be called Gorilla Kong, not Donkey Kong. Anyways, he knew about King Kong. He thought King Kong, he knew what king meant, that it meant king. He thought Kong meant gorilla. He thought King Kong meant king gorilla. So he thought Kong meant gorilla.
Okay.
And he thought donkey meant stubborn. So Donkey Kong was supposed to mean stubborn gorilla.
Not as interesting.
I did look at that.
You want to hear something else interesting?
Yeah.
How many alleyways do you think there are in Manhattan?
Too many.
4.
I was thinking, like, where did
There are no alleyways north
No,
of
in
Canal
Brooklyn
Street.
there are alleyways.
In Brooklyn there are. In Queens there
where are
are.
there alleyways?
In Crown Heights there's a lot of alleyways. In Manhattan,
That's where we hung out.
since the 1800s, there's, by city ordinance, there are no alleyways in Manhattan because they wanted to maximize the real estate. So actually there are no alleyways north of Canal Street, and there's like 4 of them south of Canal Street, and
They're very dangerous.
I don't know if they're dangerous. I think they shoot movies, and every movie that takes place in Manhattan shoots in the Cortlandt Alley. Cortlandt Alley is a famous alleyway. It's about 3-4 blocks
Crown
long.
Heights, when we lived
Crown
in
Heights
the
has
alleys.
alleys. Yeah.
That's where we lived. We hung out in the
Yeah.
alleys.
Yeah.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin is nothing but.
Nothing but alleys. Yeah. Yeah. They didn't put it in the streets. Yeah.
All the action.
Okay, should. Oh, I forgot about chapter 9. Because it was Bengals and Donkey Kong and alleyways. Who could even remember chapter 9? Okay. So, so as we said, the first 8 chapters are sort of, I call it the lexicon or the introduction to the world of Tanya. So we know about the 2 souls. We know that the souls have koichos. We know the koichos are seichel and midos. We know those faculties or koichos are expressed through levushim, garments, which number 3, machshava dibra ma'isa, thought, speech, and action. We know that the composition of both souls is zeh luma zeh, is one corresponding the other, is a mirror image of each other. We know that in the world at large as well, there's a dichotomy between Klippa and Kedusha. And we know that within Klippa, there are 2 gradations, right? Within Sitra Achra, there are 2 grades. So the redeemable, which we call Klippas Noiga, the translucent husk, and the irredeemable, which would be all things that are Asar al pi halacha. Very good. Okay, so that was the first 8 chapters. All right. Now, chapter 9, we're returning to a discussion of the souls. We're getting back to the souls, because that's, after all, the whole point of Tanya is about the user's manual for the soul. And we're going to talk about the struggle. The struggle between what? Between the 2 souls. We know about the 2 souls. And we're going to talk about where the battle line is in that struggle. Okay, so let's talk about it. Perek Tes, chapter 9. V'hinei mokim mishkan nefesh abamish meklippus neige b'chol ish Yisrael hu balev. The location of the animal soul is in the heart. What does that mean, the location? It's not a physical object. Oh, where did I leave my keys? You know, I have one of those things. It's called a tile. Yeah, it's probably a tracking device.
Yeah, I think so.
For me,
The IRS is after your box.
the Chinese government. Okay.
The phone is your tracking device.
Yeah.
True.
Anyways, where are my keys? Where did I leave my cup of coffee? You ever find cold cups of coffee all around? I saw a really great meme once. I wish I could relate to it more fully, but I related to it enough to crack up. It said, directions for iced coffee. It said, have kids. Make coffee. Forget you made coffee. Find iced coffee.
I have one making right now.
Speaking of coffee, I think you're not using soul word cup.
Somebody told me that I could get in legal trouble if I show it on YouTube.
Oh.
Yeah,
You
so
said that
I'm
last week. We were
not
like,
sure.
what?
Yeah, I thought it was a joke, but somebody contacted me and told me to
Okay, they want that.
keep it on the down low. Yeah. So
Yeah.
They can't own a font and a color.
I was told that once you put it on merchandise, it's a whole different category. Like if you would just put it on a poster, it would be one thing, but you put it on an actual piece of merchandise. Okay, so when we say that the animal soul's in the heart, we don't mean the physical location. Obviously, it's not a physical object to be found in a physical location. What we mean is, where does it get its foothold, so to speak? I don't know if that's an anatomical anomaly to say it gets its foothold in the heart. But yeah, the animal soul, where is it going to get the most leverage is in the heart, which is the seat of emotions. Because the animal soul is going to use emotional appeals to try to get its way. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. B'chol smoli shumole dom, in the left ventricle, which is full of blood. So you're going to say, well, the right ventricle is also full of blood, not oxygenated blood. The left ventricle means the blood that's going to pump out to your body, the blood that has the life force in it. And that life force, as we explained in the end of chapter 1, is called the nefesh chayunas hativis, the living soul, vitalizing natural soul. That is the life force of the body. Okay? So that's in the left ventricle of the heart, and it's, yeah?
Isn't it in the blood? You only say it's in the blood.
we said in the end of chapter 1 that it's in the end. In the end of chapter 1, we said that the nefesh habasar bidom hu, that that the soul of the flesh, meaning the energy that keeps your body alive, is carried in the blood. But where does the blood come from? Meaning the renewed blood, the useful blood, the oxygenated blood from the left ventricle. Okay. Uksiv ki hadam hu hanefesh, like it also says, the blood is the soul. Or probably more accurate, the medium for bringing the soul, the energy of the soul around around the body. Okay. V'lochein, and therefore, kol ha'tayvus v'yispodis v'kas v'demein hein balev. All these negative emotional states, like lust and pride and anger and anything like that, they're all from the heart. Umehalev, and then from the heart, hein mispashtos b'chol haguf, they spread out to the whole body. So all of the personality traits of the animal soul, the negative personality traits, negative emotional states, emanate, so to speak, from the left ventricle because they are part and parcel of the energy known as the survival instinct, which we call the enlivening soul. Okay? All right. V'gam oila l'mayach shebarosh. Then, when the personality of the animal soul is sort of pumping around the body, it goes up to the brain and does what up there? L'chashiv l'hayir bohen l'schakim bohen. To get you to think about that emotional thing, that impulse, call it an impulse, but then it goes up to the brain and it becomes intellectualized. It becomes more of a, he calls it like scheming. L'schakim, one second. L'schakim means to start scheming. So, So there's an impulse, which is an emotional, let's say an emotional drive towards something, but there's nothing too deep about it. But then it goes from the heart up to the brain, and in the brain you sort of start. Well, there's two things. There's rationalization, justifying why it's okay for me to get what I want, and then there's the scheming, like how am I going to get it? Yeah.
So if the negative traits are from the left ventricle, does that mean the positive traits are in the right ventricle?
We're going to find out where the positive traits are. We're going to find out. Yeah.
Didn't we learn that first it comes from the brain and then to the heart, like the cognitive and then the emotion, that there's a hierarchy?
Okay. So you're asking. Okay. So first of all, why do you have to remember what we learned already? Okay. Can I get a fresh slate? Okay. Fine. All right. So you asked good. Didn't we learn? Namely, you didn't say the chapter number, but I would say chapter 3, that you called it a hierarchy. Yeah. That there's the seichel and then there's the midos. Okay. Very good. So now you're saying, well, what's going on here? All right. Valid question. You remember in chapter 6 when it described the composition of the animal soul, and it said it's basically the mirror image of the godly soul. And it said how the godly soul has seichel and midos, 3 intellectual faculties and 7 emotional faculties. And then we said, in chapter 6, we said that the animal soul is the reverse. It has 7 emotional faculties and 3 intellectual faculties. And I pointed out back then, like, it's interesting, it flips the order. And I mentioned, though, it doesn't mean that, remember in chapter 3, the relationship between seichel and midos was described as do you remember? Which parent-child relationship. So it doesn't mean in chapter 6, when it mentions the emotions first and then the intellect, that whose parent and whose child has been reversed. You're correct to say that the mechanics are that emotions always are the children of intellect. That doesn't get reversed. What gets reversed is who's in control. So in a healthy situation, the parents are in control. In a dysfunctional situation, the children are in control. Okay? So in the sense that you cannot have an emotional desire for something if you don't first know about it. So the emotions are still the children of the intellect, even in the animal soul, because the animal soul first knew about this thing and then developed an emotional attachment to it. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. What happens is then the real work of the animal soul is to send that emotional impulse back up to the brain to now enlist the brain to work for the heart to rationalize what it is that you want so you can do it guilt-free, and also to scheme and to plot how you're going to get it. What happened here?
So is the issue,
Yeah.
is the issue those negative emotions like lust, pride, and anger, or is the issue the knowledge of what's leading one to have those emotions?
What do you say? What do you mean by the issue? Like, if I wanted to deal with this, where should I try to head it off?
Yeah.
Well, good luck in not knowing about anything that could tempt you. So I don't think that's where the approach to take. So you know what? This is a wonderful question. This question actually will drive the next. I was going to say the next 6 chapters, but really, in a certain way, it drives the rest of the whole book. Now, we're slowly becoming aware of what the nature of the conflict is. And so you're asking a logical question, which is, okay, being aware that there's a conflict, what's the best way to address that conflict or to manage that conflict? That's really, in a certain way, I would say that's the driving question for the rest of the book. So I'm not going to attempt to answer it overly simple right now. Okay. But at any rate, to answer your question, yes. The emotions always come from the intellect, but in the case of the animal soul, the emotions turn around and enlist the intellect to work for them, in the sense that to rationalize what it wants and to plot and scheme how to get it. Okay. So, yeah. The physical analog to that is just like the heart pumps the blood and it goes to all of the limbs, including the brain. The brain needs blood from the heart. So similarly, you kind of think about it like that the negative emotional traits or selfish emotional traits of the animal soul, the survival impulse, originate in the heart, specifically in the left ventricle, spread out to the whole body, including the brain. Okay, now, ach, we're pivoting. Ach is a pivot word. Ach, however, the location of the godly soul that we learned about in chapter 2, its location in the body is the brain, and from there it spreads out to the whole body, to all the limbs. So we have 2 headquarters. The animal soul is originating in the heart and spreading out to the whole body from there. The godly soul is originating in the brain and spreading out to the whole body from there. Yeah.
Question. It makes sense that the animal soul will be spread out through the blood, but what is the godly soul spread through? Like what's medium? Is it the blood?
You mean the physical analog?
Yeah.
The nervous system. The brain's controlling all of the limbs. Yeah. V'gam b'leiv b'chol yamani she'ein b'idam. The brain is controlling everything, including the right ventricle of the heart, which has no blood. And again, that doesn't mean it has no blood. It means blood, useful blood. Blood is called blood when it's useful. Useful blood has oxygen in it. Otherwise, it doesn't do much for the cells if it doesn't have oxygen in it. Okay. Like King Solomon says, that the heart of the wise man is on his right side. What that means is that the right ventricle of the heart, which doesn't have the oxygenated blood, meaning it's devoid of that intense survival impulse. So that part of the heart is more neutral, more receptive to the godly soul. Whereas in the left ventricle, where you have that intense survival impulse, it's resistant to the godly soul because it has its own agenda. Now, at this point, what happens in chapter 9 is, I call this the dream sequence. This is the fantasy of the godly soul. This is what, in a perfect world, what would happen to a person if the godly soul were to get his way. So he spreads out this godly soul. I actually call it she. We should call it she because souls are girls. So she spreads out from the brain to the heart, taking sort of a foothold in the right ventricle where there's no resistance. V'hi avas Hashem kirishbi shalahavis mislahavis belev maskilim mavinim misbeinim bedaitam asher b'meichem b'dvarim ha'ma'irim misoava. What happens is now the brain is using the heart, starting from the right ventricle, which is more conducive to that kind of stuff. The brain is using the heart to have feelings of intense love, glowing coal fire intensity of love for Hashem. V'chein simchas levav b'tferes Hashem v'adar ga'oinai. Also other emotions like tiferes, which is the glorification of God. Kasher einei achacham asher bereisha b'mei chachmose v'nosei. He calls it when the eyes of the wise man, which are in his head, in the brain of Chochmah and Bina, mistaklim, stare at, b'yikara de malka, the glory of the king, v'tiferes gedulase, ad ein cheker, ve'ein soif v'tachlis Hashem, whose glory is infinite, k'mavur b'makom achar, like explained elsewhere. It's not talking about physical eyes, it's not talking about visual staring, it's talking about meditation. Focused, concentrated thought. So, when the godly soul is getting its way, the brain is meditating on God, and the heart is feeling the effects of that meditation. Namely, the heart is filling up with intense, glowing coal fire-like love for Hashem. V'chein shar midis kadeshes shabalev hein me Chabad shabameichin. Also, all of the other holy emotions of the heart, they also come from the Chabad, from the Chochmah Bina Das, from the intellectual faculties of the brain. So that's the ideal, what's going to happen when the godly soul is able to get its way. So the brain is meditating on the glory of the king, and the heart is feeling the effects.
The right ventricle?
The right ventricle, yeah. We're going to find,
Does that include also feelings of ira, or just?
Yeah, but he said the other emotions as well, which includes yira, but primarily love. Love is the primary emotion. That's what Burt Bacharach said. Actually, he wrote the song. Hal David wrote the words.
You're not old enough to know that.
Oh, I'm old enough. I'm old enough. Okay. Bert's still alive, by the way.
Go ahead.
He's in his 90s. He's still making
What
music.
song was it?
Don't worry, Gary Gygax.
Hi, I'm writing down the song. I went on.
Okay, how many alleys in Manhattan?
4.
See, we have something for everybody in this class. All right. However, there's that pivot word again. However, hineksiv, it says, La'im yamotz. Where in Torah does it say one nation will strengthen itself over the other? Where does it say that? Ula'im yamotz. Very good. So when Rivka's pregnant, and she's like, what's going on here? So she finds out she's got 2 nations in her womb. That's the recipe for iced coffee. Double iced coffee. Ki aguf nikra ir ketana. Now this analogy is like the main imagery for this chapter. The body is called a small city, Ir Katana, small city, like Erie, Pennsylvania. Small city. I don't know, that's what I think of when I think of a small city. Okay.
You mean as a pregnant or a non-pregnant?
It is, yes, it is a small pregnant city. Yeah. Now we're mixing metaphors, but yes. Ukemei shishnei malachim nilchamim al ir achas. It's like 2 kings who are fighting over one city. There actually was a battle in the War of 1812, Battle of Lake Erie, near Erie, Pennsylvania. By the way, the most treasure in the Great Lakes is in Lake Erie, because the most shipwrecks were in Lake Erie. You know why? Because it's the shallowest of the lakes. You know the deepest of the Great Lakes? Lake Superior. It's deep as an ocean. You know how to remember the Great Lakes? Homes, Homes. I'm from Chicago. I know my Great Lakes. Okay. So there's a little city. 2 kings are fighting over the big... Why did I say big city? Little city. 2 kings are fighting over the little city. Each king wants to conquer it and rule it. Dahainu. What does that mean, to conquer it and rule it? To conduct its denizens according to its will. And that the denizens of the city should yield to the instructions of the king. So you got the parable? What are denizens?
Yeah.
Denizens is actually the most accurate term here. Denizens means the people who live in a city.
Denizen is the people who live in the city.
A denizen is a person who lives in a city. Denizens is plural, those who live in a city. Denizens, D-E-N-I-Z-E-N-S, denizens.
Z-E-N-S.
Yeah. You know what word which is similar, has a similar suffix that we use more commonly, is citizens. But denizens is probably the more correct term here.
What's with these kids?
What? If you were focused properly on Tanya, you would not notice the cheering of the children. You have to focus. Histakel b'yakara de malka. To stare. That's what I said. That staring means meditation. You have to stare. You know, like when you physically stare. So mentally you have to stare. Shouldn't bother you that the kids are screaming in the other room. Okay. So here's the analogy. Remember, there's a little city. How many cities are there?
2.
1.
Oh, 1. 2 kings.
1 city, 2 kings. If there were 2 cities, we wouldn't have a problem.
Right.
Because we tell each king, you take Erie, Pennsylvania, you take Peoria, Illinois, and everyone, Shalom Yisrael.
One pregnant city.
Why is it a small city?
Why is it a small city? You're going to find out. You're going to find out. So there's 1 small city, and there are 2 kings. Now each king has what kind of an agenda? Total domination. Kach, so too, here's the nimshal. Thank you for the correct term. Shtei hanafashes, the 2 souls. We know the 2 souls, right? We learned about the 2 souls. Hoalekis, the godly one. V'chayunas abahamis shema klippa, the enlivening animalistic one that comes from klippa. Those 2 souls. Nilchomezu imzu, are fighting each other over what? Al haguf v'chol evarev, over the body and all of its limbs. So what's the small city? I heard a bunch of different answers. What's the small city? The body. That's why it's called a small city. Because usually a person is smaller than a city. So it's a really small city. It's a person-sized city. Population, 1. Which is crazy. Population 1, but there are 2 guys running for mayor.
Everybody's fighting.
Crazy. Okay, and who are the Evarim, the limbs?
The ventricles.
The denizens of the city. Yeah.
Great word.
Okay. Shoalakis, the godly soul. Back to the godly soul's dream sequence. Here's the fantasy of the godly soul. Its fantasy is that it will be the sole ruler of the city. And everyone in the city, meaning all of the limbs of the body, are going to follow its will. All of the limbs will listen to it and actually be automatically subservient to it. That's what it means, batal. Automatically subservient, like without even having to think. The body and all of its limbs will be like a vehicle for the automatic expression of the will of the godly soul. That's what the godly soul is hoping for. What is the godly soul hoping for? It's going to dominate this city, and the body will become a garment for its 10 faculties that we learned about in chapter 3, and its 3 garments that we learned about in chapter 4. And that those faculties and garments will be expressed in the limbs of the body. So in other words, the godly soul's fantasy is that the physical body will be a seamless continuation and expression of its 10 faculties and 3 garments. The body will be full of nothing but the koiches and levushim of the nefesh olakis. And no foreigner will pass through, meaning the animal soul. That what does the godly soul want? That the 3 intellectual faculties, Chochmah Bina Das, will be completely subservient, automatically subservient to the Chochmah Bina Das of the godly soul. She Chochmah Hashem Binase, which means that it will the Chochmah of the brain will only be used for Chochmah Hashem, meaning knowing God, and the Bina of the brain will be only used for Binas Hashem, understanding God, and so on and so forth. And basically, what is the brain going to do all day? In the fantasy version of the godly soul, what is the brain going to do all day? Just think of Hashem. That's it. Think about anything else? No. Why would you? Why would you? And then you're going to think about Hashem all day, meaning your brain's going to be full of thoughts of God. So automatically, what's going to be the effect of that on the heart? And to be born, the word is born, parent-child relationship, what will be born from all that thinking about God all day? Through Das. Remember, Das is the connection between Chochmah and Bina we learned about in chapter 3. You're going to feel awe of God in your heart. And dread of God, Vavaz Hashem, and love of God, like a glowing, raging fire, like a coal. And again, this is still the godly soul's fantasy. What's going to happen? This meditation of God, that the whole brain's going to be only occupied thinking about God, and that's going to pour over into the heart, and then the heart's going to be exploding with this intense love for Hashem. From the depths of the heart in the right ventricle. And that love in the right ventricle is going to be overflowing or as we call it in my house, overfloating. Because my kids, when they were little, they would say, the garbage is overfloating. Yeah. Okay. So imagine that. This is still the godly soul's fantasy. You're meditating on God exclusively. All of that is generating intense emotions about God, and that's pouring into the right ventricle. Now the right ventricle is mole v'godush. You know what that means, mole v'godush? Overfloating. So what's going to happen if it's overfloating? What? Ad shetispashit gam l'chol l'smoli.
No, it'll take over the left side.
That's right. It's going to overflow from the right side into the left side. What's going to happen in the fantasy of the godly soul is that the intensity of love for Hashem in the right ventricle is going to be so much that it's going to go into the left ventricle, and it's going to co-opt the emotions that I got very paranoid about the recording because of what happened last week. Yeah. And what's going to happen is, the left ventricle still, by birth, it is the survival mechanism. It is the, please don't forget to eat. Please don't forget to take care of your body. But in the fantasy of the godly soul, because remember, these are two kings that want total domination of the city. So total domination means eventually the love of God is going to pour over and even take over the natural mechanism for survival. And all the person is going to want exclusively is going to be Hashem. So this is what the godly soul wants. The godly soul wants to have such an intense presence in the body that it becomes to the exclusion of any other influence. And that the left ventricle, which is normally about survival impulses, taking care of yourself, that'll also be taken over by yeah. Urim v'tumim, how so? I never heard this before. What?
It could be Urim v'tumim, because the Urim is the fiery devotion, and the Tumim is the subjugation of that to serve Hashem.
Never heard that. You saw this somewhere, or you're just occurring to you?
I was just thinking about this passion, the potion and everything.
So that's your chiddush. That's amazing. It's good. Write it up.
Okay. Is this realistic? And is this
I never said it was realistic. What did I say? I said this is the fantasy of the godly soul. Okay. The whole book of Tanya is about realistic. What's realistic? But before we get to what's realistic, I want to tell you what the godly soul would like. We should hear from her. So she says this is what you're asking the godly soul. Well, I see you have an agenda. What's your agenda?
It says she.
All souls are she's.
Really?
The nefesh is lashon nekeva. The soul is a girl.
I didn't know that.
Because I know grammar.
It says she in my Tanya.
So
Yeah.
at the beginning of the class, you said this chapter was written by somebody else?
No.
Or the other 8 chapters were written by somebody
No,
else?
I didn't say that. It says a different color on the map.
Blue instead of orange.
Okay. Okay, so it's overfloating. Shehiyat taivish meklipas noiga. So the left ventricle is usually the desires that come from klipas noiga. We're not talking about desires to do sins, which are prohibited. We're talking about desires from klipas noiga, neutral stuff. Just things that you're interested in keeping your body alive, right? But then in the fantasy of the godly soul, the godly love on the right side is so powerful, it comes over and it takes over the regular stuff, the mundane stuff from the left side. To change it over, to repurpose, to convert the normal mundane desires. We're not talking about bad stuff, just normal mundane stuff, but to take even the mundane stuff and to co-opt it to become part of the desire for holy stuff. Like we say, you should love Hashem with all your heart, not just b'chol libcha, b'chol levavacha, with 2 bases, which means with both of your desires. That's the fantasy, that the godly soul, which we could also call the Yetzer Tov, will co-opt the animal soul, which is also called the Yetzer Hara. So the Yetzer Tov turns the Yetzer Hara into a second Yetzer Tov.
Is that the process of elevating the Kripas Noga? Is that what we just...
It's a process. It's certainly one scenario, and it is the scenario, as I said, that the godly soul desires. Yeah.
And when we do elevate, when we make Kiddush, and when we elevate...
You're asking, is that what's happening? We're not getting to practicality right now. Because right now the context is we're understanding the conflict. To understand a conflict, you have to know what each side wants. So right now we're just learning, what does the godly soul want? That's all I'm learning. Yeah?
I'm just going to see if you're going to get to it first. I could just hold off on my question.
You want to hold off?
Maybe you answered it. I was wondering if one the Yetzer Hara is now turned into a second Yetzer Tov. Is it similar to the first one? Or is it...
It's even better than the first one. When the second Yetzer Hara gets turned, when the Yetzer Hara gets turned into a second Yetzer Tov, it's even better than the original Yetzer Tov, because it's crazy like a Yetzer Hara, but it's good crazy.
It's like about tshuva.
How it's happening?
Why are we talking about Yetzer Hara versus the animal soul?
Why did I use that term? Because the lashon that the Chazal use when they explain b'chol levavacha means two hearts, and they say with two of, they use the term yetzer, b'shnei yitzorecha, with both of your yetzers. So that's why I'm using that term.
Is
Okay,
there a Yetzer Benoni?
you're gonna find out. You're gonna find out. You're gonna find out. V'hainu. Okay, let's continue here. V'hainu. Sheyala v'yava yagia lemedreges ava rabba v'chiba yeserem lemedreges ava aza k'dish b'yesh. What does the godly soul want? You're going to come to such a high level of love. There are technical terms for this love. Ava rabba, chiba yesera, ava aza k'dish b'yesh. These are poetic ways of describing intense love. You're going to come to this level of love here nikras because of ava b'tainugim. It's also called a love of delights, blissful love. It's a love that is just you're high on your love of God. It's just absolutely delightful. Lisaneg al Hashem me'inei lam haba, to delight in Hashem, similar to the delight of the world to come. Where is that pleasure? It's in the brain, because it's really the pleasure of understanding. It's the pleasure of understanding godly concepts, according to your intellectual ability. This, if you want to know, is related to the idea of the water, the elemental water. We speak about the four elements from time to time over here. The elemental water, which is in the godly soul. We spoke about the elemental water in the animal soul, which is the lust for worldly pleasures. The elemental water in the godly soul is the pleasure in understanding God. So what happens? The elemental water of the godly soul converts the elemental water of the animal soul, and it takes the elemental water of the animal soul, which is by default the love of bodily things, physical things, worldly, concrete things, takes that same energy and hijacks it in a good way. Good hijackers, I guess. Freedom fighters. Just depends who's writing the article. And turns that love of mundane things into a love of God. Okay, now, as we were saying, this is all the fantasy of the godly soul. So remember, there's a conflict. There's two kings. They're fighting over one small city. And we're going to ask the godly soul, as one of the kings who's fighting in this battle, what's your agenda? Would you like a two-state solution? Would you like to compromise? And the godly soul says, no, I want to dominate so thoroughly that I take over all of the resources of my enemy so that my enemy has to join me and become my biggest proponent. That's what the godly soul wants. Nothing short of that. Which you could understand now why this conflict is going to be so intense, because there's really no room for compromise. Let's continue. We're going to finish the chapter. Like it says in the Eitz Chaim from Chaim Vital, that in the ideal scenario, the Yetzer Hara gets turned into a second Yetzer. The Yetzer Hara gets turned into a second Yetzer Tov. Mamash, he says literally. When the object of desire of the animal soul is removed, it's called begadim atzayim, the filthy garments. When the objects of desire of the animal soul become removed from it, and all that's left is the raw energy, and that raw energy can be redirected to a new object of desire, namely, what's the new object of desire? Hashem. So now all that power becomes repurposed. That's called a second Yetzer Tov. And not just Ava, but all of the emotions. All of the emotions, meaning all the offshoots of love and fear, all become dedicated exclusively. 99.9%? No. 100% to Hashem. This is what the godly soul wants. And I want to tell you something, it's not just on an emotional level, because we know about there's koiches and there's levushim. There's the insides and the outsides. So you think the godly soul is going to stop just with taking over the emotions? No, it's going to keep going. Remember the three garments, thought, speech, and action, the three modes of expression? It wants those too. It wants everything. All of the speech in the mouth, the machshava shebemayach, and all the conscious thought processes in the brain. Always a hard word to pronounce. Mimuloim. Min lavushe hamachshava v'hadibar shel nefesh v'alakis levada will all be full of nothing but the godly soul. So the speech becomes an exclusive vehicle to godly speech, and the thought of the brain becomes an exclusive vehicle to godly thought. Shein machshavas Hashem v'teiraseh liyes sichaseh kol hayom leipasek pum megirsa. All the thoughts are just about Torah. All the speech is just Torah, never ceasing. And then, of course, the third garment, action, the entirety of the body, your entire anatomy, every limb, every pinky toe, will be exclusively used for mitzvahs. Which is the third garment. So the first one is thought, then speech, and then action, in concentric circles radiating outward, from inward to outward. Okay. So that was the fantasy of Nefesh Elokis. We've got like one line left. Did we hear yet from the... No, we didn't. So should we hear from him? Her?
One line? Her.
One line. But you remember before how we did it. We introduced the Nefesh Elokis in chapter 2, and then chapter 3 we spoke about its koiches, and chapter 4 we spoke about its levushim, chapter 5 we spoke about its mazain, and then chapter 6 we had one little chapter about the Nefesh Abamis, and we explained why that was. Because it's just, you just flip it. Okay. So everything we just described, the intensity and the extreme agenda of the Nefesh Elokis. So let's continue now and see what the agenda of Nefesh Abamis is. However, Nefesh Abamis shema klipa, the animal soul which originates in the klipa, ritzayna. Again, she's a girl. Ritzayna, not ritzaynai. Ritzayna. Her desire, lehefech mamash, is literally the opposite. Literally the opposite. So everything we learn about the godly soul, same thing, just flip it. With the same degree of intensity, it wants to be the sole ruler of the small city. L'toivas ha'adam, however, you should know, and this is very important so you don't get depressed, the fact that this is what the animal soul wants is actually l'toivas ha'adam, for the benefit of the person.
Which part of the person?
Now you're getting into a deep question. Who's this person? Okay. But let's just simplify it like this. I'm the city, and there are two kings fighting over me. One of them wants me to be completely dedicated to God. I guess he's a good guy. The other one wants me to be completely dedicated to selfishness. I guess if I'm mature enough, I understand that's pretty scary. It's pretty scary because I'm not a 3-year-old. If I were 3 years old, I'd say, oh, that's cool. He wants me to just indulge and be me. But if I'm mature enough, I realize actually that's kind of scary. I don't want to be a two-legged animal. So that's kind of scary. But I should realize that even the animal soul's agenda to make me into an absolutely self-consumed two-legged animal is l'toivas ha'adam. It's for the benefit of the person. Why is it for the benefit of the person? She is gaber aleha, that you should overcome it, v'yinatzacheno, and you should defeat it. So it wants you to overcome it. The animal soul wants you to overcome it. K'mashal hazayna shabazayir HaKadosh, like the analogy of the harlot. Harlot is the sichas, an English word that we all use. I think harlot's a confusing word. It's a prostitute. It is so that's what, she is a hired. Okay, let me explain what the mashal in the Zohar is. There's a king. The king wants to test the virtue of his son. He hires a woman who ostensibly this is her profession. And apparently in the mashal it implies she's at the top of her profession. And he says, do everything in your ability, without telling my son that you were paid, obviously, do everything in your ability to get my son to sin. And she understands the purpose of her job is a moral test. Now, she's a very interesting character, this Zaina in the Zohar HaKadosh, because she has a conflicted agenda. On the one hand, she knows the purpose. The purpose is the king will be very sad if the son succumbs to her temptation. So she knows that really the king wants that the son should resist. On the other hand, he hired her, told her, do your best for a reason, because it has to be a real test. So she can't just, throw the fight and take a dive, like, when you bribe the boxer to not really fight, right? No, she's got to really, really try. She's got to really try. So she's got a very interesting motivation here, this character, is that on one hand, she has to try her hardest, and the other hand, she wants to fail. So the Zohar says you should understand that Nefesh Habahamis is like this Zaina who was hired by the king to test his son. The Nefesh Habahamis is going to try hard to turn you into a raging narcissist who can justify any indulgence and bowl over everyone in your life and have great excuses for it. That's what Nefesh Habahamis is going to try to make you do. But you should know why it's trying to make you do that. It's not a free agent. It's not working for itself. It works for Hashem, and it wants you to resist. But if it wants you to resist, that doesn't mean that it's just going to make it easy for you. No, it's going to make it hard for you so that you can really resist. So imagine it sort of like this trainer or this gym coach who's screaming at you. And you're like, you're such a tyrant. No. If if I do another burpee, I'm going to pass out. And he says, you do another burpee. And you run up the, the burpee, burpees? Oh my gosh. You ever did burpees? Yeah? Oh my gosh. Like a squat down, you kick out your feet, and it's crazy. Okay, anyways. But yeah?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
The city and its faculties and garments. So the three faculties, Chabad,
Yeah.
and the garments are the 10 spheres?
No. There are 10 total faculties. The faculties are the koiches nefesh that we learned about in chapter 3, which are 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. And then the garments are the thought, speech, and action that we learned about in chapter 4. So the godly soul wants complete expression of all of its 10 faculties and 3 garments. And the animal soul also wants complete expression of all of its 10 faculties and 3 garments.
But really, it wants what the soul wants.
But really, it wants what Hashem wants. They both really want what Hashem wants.
But it's in a double bind.
It's in a double bind, yeah.
Which means it might be better.
Conflicted denizen.
What?
Why would Hashem do this? Like,
Why would Hashem do this? That's a very philosophical question. And in fact, in chapter 35, we will ask, why, Hashem, is this your idea of a good time? But at any rate, we're over time. I just want to sum up. So what do we learn today? There's a small city. What's the small city? No. Who's the small city? Yes. Okay? 2 kings. Godly soul, animal soul. Their agenda, each one, no compromise. Total domination. Now we've set the scene for what the conflict is. In the next 2 chapters, we're going to talk about various different scenarios, how different personae, different types of people, manage that conflict better or worse.
right, because we're all individual cities, but we're different.
Right. So we're going to talk about different ways that the conflict plays out. But at least now you know who are the players. You know where the game's being played. You know who's playing the game. How's it going to play out? There are different scenarios. Okay?
But it's not like the Bengals and the Rams.
It's not like the Bengals and the Rams.
This is
No.
serious.
And they both agree on 3 and 7.
Yes. Yeah?
Are they kings, princes?
Kings. They're kings. They're 2 kings.
Kings, but they also have a king.
They're kings who have a king. The vassal of my vassal is not my vassal. Feudalism. That was the problem with feudalism. The vassal of my vassal is not my vassal. Anyways, you look it up, okay? All right.